was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie, please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom, boom. I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Welcome, everyone. My name is Penny S.T., and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. I'm looking forward to speaking with Rabbi Dr. Yakov Nagen today. He is the co-chairman on the Israel Board of Directors for the Abrahamic Reunion. He is also the director of the Blickle Institute for Interfaith Dialogue. He's traveled, studied, and researched throughout the world. Rabbi Nagen is a leading rabbinical figure in interfaith peace initiatives between Judaism and Islam and in encounters between Judaism and Eastern religions. He studied Torah at several Israeli religious academies and earned a BA and MS from Yeshiva University. Rav Nagen is a prolific writer and has published several books. In 2016, he was profiled in Tablet magazine as one of the 10 Israeli rabbis you should know. Welcome, Rabbi.
Welcome, Penny.
You've been involved with many interfaith movements and events on peace throughout the world and in the United States. Soon we'll be speaking with you primarily about the Abrahamic Reunion. However, let's begin by taking a look at some events and also talk about other peace organizations that you work with. Let me share my screen. This slide is from a day of tolerance that was held after the recent violence with Gaza and riots in Israel. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, this is in Rahat, is the largest Muslim city in Israel. There's 75,000 Muslims living there. And after so much of the violence within cities, during the difficult period, I was very much working together with my friend Sheikh Jamal, who is the Imam of Rahat's largest mosque, and I brought a group of rabbis and Jewish leaders to spend the full day in Rahat to create a person-to-person connection, going to mosque, educational institutions. We visited a Bedouin woman in her tent that she made into a restaurant. She was born in Gaza, and her family is from there. To person-to-person connection.
As the founding director of the Blickle Institute for Interfaith Dialogue, which just began in October 2020, what's the organization's mission?
Okay, well, there are two, we really have two branches. One of the branches is a think tank that we feel of an inner Jewish study. feeling that the dramatic change of Jewish life from returning to live independently in Israel requires new thinking about how the Jewish people should relate to humanity as a whole. What's our part in this broad story of humanity? For so long, we lived in a survival mode. And in survival mode, you build walls to protect yourself. But in Israel, we feel we should strive for a vision. And what is that vision in Jewish philosophy, in halakha? But in the Interfaith Institute, we try to implement it. Or Torah Stone has 30 educational institutions in Israel. It's high schools, it's yeshivot for boys, it's midrashot for girls, and to bring interfaith content to our students, to realize that part of Jewish education is learning how to connect up to people of other faiths, other traditions, and other nationalities. So we have an educational aspect, but also we try to lead in the interfaith encounters in the Holy Land. I focus on Islam, and I have an associate, David Nikrutman, who focuses on the Jewish-Christian encounter.
Wow. Oh, now everyone don't get too concerned. Rabbi's fine, but can you explain what happened here?
This was really one of the most lovely days of my life. Here again, this is Sheikh Jamal Al-Ubra, and in the largest Bedouin school in Israel, there are 1,200 students in the high school. They decided with his initiative to have a day of tolerance. They brought the 4 Abrahamic religions. In Israel, we consider the Druze religion, sure, they're not well known in the West, but Druze are also a fellow Abrahamic religion. And representatives of all 4 religions, we went into every single classroom in the school. Part of it was because the Arab sector in Israel has been suffering from internal violence. A lot of it of different clans have, based on family honor, different feuds, which have led to a lot of victims. So the Sheikh felt by having religious leaders of 4 traditions coming and speaking together about the will of God, speaking out against the violence, this would impact on the children. And at the end of the day, we brought a large olive tree. We need a tractor to plant it. And they asked me to put the sign on of Day of Tolerance, but I stood up and I hit my head on the tree. And I got a cut. And the Sheikh jokingly says, you see, you're gonna go back to your Jewish city and they're gonna say, look what happens when you go to an Arab city, you come back with a wound on your head. But fortunately, it was in good spirits. And it was so impressive to see also the dialogue, the principal at the end of the day spoke to all the 12th graders and saying, here we have the 4 different Abrahamic religions. And it doesn't matter which religion you're connected to, it matters how you fulfill the will of God in your religion. And in fact, this is a saying that appears in the Quran, in the 5th surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Ma'idah. It says that God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, the Gospels to the Christians, the book, meaning the Quran, to the Muslims, and therefore we should each live based on the book that we've given from God. Unfortunately, in the Middle Ages, different medieval polemics led to a theology of what's called the Nask, believing that the Quran has superseded the previous traditions. But I think the simple meaning of the Quran, and I hope that many Muslims are returning to this, that there's a pluralism within Abrahamic religions, which goes back to the Quran itself.
Wow, you don't often hear that information, unfortunately. But I love the humanity that's shown in this particular photo. Now, the next one, I believe you told me previously that this picture was from a peace conference in Jericho.
Yes, this is the Abrahamic reunion. We had our yearly, it was a 2-day conference we had in Jericho. And here we had together the Israeli chapter together with the American chapter. because we have it was very lovely, but it's sort of part of the challenges, because in the conference, there's a very courageous Palestinian professor, Mohammed Dajani.
I know him well.
Yes.
I've interviewed him as well.
So he's really a very very lovely person, but because he, as a Palestinian nationalist, he's spoken about reconciliation, and also he was to Auschwitz. He began getting persecuted, so he ended up leaving to America. Here he came back specially, but somehow some anti-normalization activists, they're activists who feel that any contact between Israelis and Palestinians, they fight against that, what I think is self-defeating policy, thinking that not talking to each other is going to lead to something. They ultimately started protesting against the conference because of his presence, and ultimately they needed the Palestinian police to try to help get the people out. So again, a lot of the Palestinians are very courageous because of internal dissent, that talking about coexistence often leads to really physical harm or danger. So they're the real heroes of the interfaith movement.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And in this group, these are wonderful people here. On the far left, we have Siham, who is a leader of the Druze, of the Druze. We have covered with black. This is this is Sana. Sana, the wife of Khalil, the Muslim chairman of the Abrahamic movement, and she was actually the first woman to ever light a bonfire at Israel's Day of Independence.
Wow.
Yeah, they actually live quite close to me. They live about a 15-minute drive from my house, so they're my closest neighbors.
Very, very cool. Okay, and in this next one,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Right, so I believe, okay, actually, I might be mistaken. I'm looking again at the picture. It might, I think it's, I'll tell you what I thought it was. It might have been a different event, but I'll tell you about my first mission. In 2012, there was a day, I think in December, that a group, I think from San Francisco, decided that at every sacred spot in the world, at the same time, people should be praying together. So they had on the pyramids in Giza, like throughout the world, and then there was a group in and there was a group that came of Jews, Muslims, and Christians that we divided up in the old city, Jews to the Kotel, the Muslims to Al-Aqsa, and the Christians to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But now that I'm looking again at this picture, I think I apologize. I think I might have gotten this picture wrong, but it's a good picture. It was a good event, so we've connected them.
Well, always on the way, of course, going to the wall, Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's there's something about that, and being able to see those sites that are fantastic.
And let me add something about something which I feel in reality, both Jewish and Muslim traditions, this should be the place of connection. In the book of Isaiah, the future vision of the temple is a house of prayer for people of all nations. So to think that Islam, which is more than 1 billion people, and is deeply connected to Al-Aqsa in the belief in the same one God, this is a dramatic and emotional fulfillment of a biblical prophecy. On the same token, in the Islamic connection to Al-Aqsa is the 17th surah of the Quran, and that the Prophet Muhammad is told to come to Al-Aqsa, the faraway mosque, and there in that chapter it tells the story of the first and second temple both being destroyed. So in fact, I think this is a case that, except seeing the other narrative, could create something which is not a loss for each side, but a blessing, to see that part of the deep connection to Al-Aqsa is because this is the site of the Temple of Solomon, who in the prayer at the dedication said, let God listen to the prayers of all the non-Jews from afar, and then Muhammad comes to the far away mosque. There's a dialogue between these prayers. So if we open our eyes to the blessings, that it's not about if one has more, the other has less. If we're both connected, we both have more.
Amen. In this one, you're actually on your way, I believe, to an Interfaith Club at MIT.
Yes, correct. This is two very dear friends. There is Sheikh Ibrahim. I guess you could guess from the picture who's the sheikh.
Yes.
His family's lived for centuries on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And he's a very well-known interfaith activist. And standing next to him is Julius Mansour, and he Christian, and he has a beautiful school in the Galilee, a school with 800 children, and Mansour somehow he knows how to work the system well, meaning somehow he knows how to get donor. Like, I couldn't believe my eyes, a school that was so clean and new and beautiful, and the kids were really lovely. But I have one very nice story from visiting his school in this city of Ramah in the north. I asked the children, why is it that when something happens in Israel, in the Holy Land, tiny things happen here, but the whole world talks about it? So the Arab children answered, they said, it's because everything started here. Meaning the feeling that Judaism, Christianity, and part of the Muslim story, this is such and much of the Quran is retelling the story of the Bible, that by things starting here, this is why the world's eyes are so much on what's happening in the Holy Land. And maybe feeling that if things are resolved here, it could give hope for other places as well. And here we were on the way to MIT. There was I think was an interfaith club there that we spoke at. A lot of good spirits. Julius has a great sense of humor. He says, thank God I'm Christian. I go with Rabbi Yaakov, and he's always asking, is it kosher? And I go with Ibrahim, and is it halal? And here, I can eat anything I want. So he was very cheap, a lot of good spirits at the, I think it might have been related to, there was some food there, and we were checking out, who could eat it. Let me mention, I realized that Judaism and Islam, we are very lenient when it comes to eating. The president of Israel once invited the leaders of the 7 non-Abrahamic religions of Asia, realizing that most of the world is Asia. So the president of Israel decided to invite leaders of these 7 religions. So I was there representing Israel as Judaism. So we had Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists, Jain religion, Zoroastrians, Taoism, and Shinto. But when it came to eat lunch, on every part of the food, it was written, who could eat this? And they keep going on. You finally get to the Jain or Jainish religion, and you have these green leaves or something like that. Although the woman representing said that what they really like eating is mangoes. So I guess next time we'll have to get a lot of mangoes for them. But after that, we were in America there. We stopped by MIT, but then we were on our way to Salt Lake City, where was then held the World Parliament of Religions. which is really an amazing event. And I thought there was something very electric about there also was, I think, 2016, a time of great suffering and in Israel. There were a lot of terrorist attacks also. People in my community were killed. And they're seeing people's minds were what was happening in Israel and in the Palestinian Authority. And they're having representatives from the Abrahamic reunion of all four religions together. Was really an electric feeling, the possibility to say, we're together here as a family.
You believe in getting involved when there are terrorist attacks, like after the murder of the Dwabshe family in Duma. Can you please talk about what happened in the prayer vigil you organized for the victims?
Right. Okay, so in it, there was an arson attack in Duma that it's believed done by Jews, and we felt, and there was a family that was killed in that, so we felt need to take responsibility. So we had a prayer vigil. It was by settlers in the West Bank. We had 4 Palestinian speakers to share their narrative, their story, and rabbis speaking out about these acts of violence. But the truth is, the words that most stay with me from that day were said actually by the person who's now the foreign minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, who's actually not religious. He's a symbol of secularism, but he had a very powerful message. We didn't invite him because we didn't want politicians, we wanted religious leaders, we wanted people who live on the bank, but he showed up unannounced, but he had a short and very powerful message. And I think this is why it's so important for people to speak out against violence, because he says the struggle, it's not between the left and the right. It's not between religious and secular. It's not between Jews and Arabs. We have extremists from both sides that are constantly trying to set ourselves against each other. And the way we stop that is showing that there are voices that will speak out against issues. So for example, my friend, there was a woman, a Jewish woman who was murdered jogging a few months ago. And a friend of mine, who's the imam of the largest mosque in Kfar Qasim, he devoted his Friday lecture to speaking out against that crime. And so I think that's very critical. But let me add one extra point, which is something which I think is often lost. The ability for someone to speak out against violence in their community, it only works if you're deeply connected to your community. Meaning if you're both Jews or Arab, because sometimes I remember one of the leaders of the Abrahamic reunion once said he doesn't like peace demonstrations that don't demonstrate peace. Sometimes people, if you're not empathizing and deeply rooted and connected to your community, then to condemn your community, you're seen just as an outsider or something which and therefore you're not effective. So sometimes I know, sometimes for the West, there are Jews who will condemn particular acts, but if you're not there in solidarity when the Jewish people need you, then your ability to be effective critiquing is often undercut.
Sure.
Right. So it's saying the obvious, but sometimes the question sometimes that's missed. So it's people who are deeply rooted in their community who are able to speak out. That's what makes a difference.
Well, I would like to get to the Abrahamic reunion now by first starting by showing a 4-minute clip that kind of explains their philosophies.
Bringing up the commonality of religion can help people to recognize the other.
It creates a very, very deep understanding between people from different faiths.
How can we choose war while the fruits of peace are in front of our eyes?
In today's situation in Israel, in the Holy Land, we have two deeply wounded and traumatized people, the Israelis and the Palestinians, who are in essence actually brothers, cousins.
We are the descendant, we are the children of Abraham. And unfortunately, the conflict happens inside the family.
The first story in the Bible, the creation, was a murder case. Cain killed his brother, Abel.
I think the most important work we do is we seek to deepen understanding and create connections between diverse spiritual communities.
Because we have people of different religions talking about, well, this means this to me, this means this to me, and then the bridge becomes very common. It's really apparent. Oh, we're really speaking about the same thing, aren't we?
So Abrahamic reunion creates a tight-knit community where we actually lift each other up, protect each other from the forces of fear and separation.
We do this work in churches and in synagogues. We do it in mosques.
You have to be part of this peace, to be part of this group, to be part of this people, not only to talk, to meet each other.
Whatever we do, we are not going to reach the solution unless we have peace.
Look, peace is not going to be perfect, and peace is not going to be without problems, but still it's peace. Given an opportunity, people will love each other. They might not like each other. They don't have to like each other.
Don't agree with the people, but respect them because they have their own ideas, their own faith, their own ways of thinking.
The peace, it's between people, not between the politics.
If we waited for the politicians, we would get nowhere. So we decide to act, take in our own hands peace and harmony and understanding.
The people in the road, in the quarters, in the street, they will make peace, not by a media or in the parliaments.
Here, everybody is looking at their little piece of the puzzle. If we look at the whole thing, it'll give inspiration outside the linear, the rational thinking, and we'll come up with a solution. Something will emerge. If we begin to recognize that peace is the whole animal, we'll find a way.
Biggest defense as an Israeli Jew that I have, my shield of protection, is a hand reached out, the love in the heart of my Palestinian Muslim neighbor, my Christian neighbor, my Druze neighbor. They're my shield of protection. They're my shield of Abraham.
I have to say, really, that I love all the different religions that are filmed in the clip. But one of my favorite parts of that clip is the light coming in. That really, to me, says it all. The Abrahamic Reunion was founded in 2004, and working with them, you believe that religion can be used as a force for peace. Can you explain?
Yes, one of the great figures at the Abrahamic Reunion was Rabbi Menachem Frumin of blessed memory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of his great insights was if religion is part of the problem in the Middle East, which everybody will agree to, if it's part of the problem, it'll have to be part of the solution. Religion could separate between people. It could create disconnection, but religion could also be the basis of a firm connection to make the other into a brother. Sorry about the gender. And it depends on what is if you believe that the other is worshiping a different God, the other is someone rejected by God, your religious belief will separate between you. If how it's a little to my daughter. Okay.
Aw,
Okay. However,
so cool.
yes, yeah, okay,
I can't resist a kid.
definitely. Okay.
Oh, you have 7 of them, so oh my goodness.
7 blessings every day.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. But if you believe that the God that the other is praying to is the same God that we're praying to, that we believe in, that we love, that we believe love us, that our beliefs will be a source of connection instead of disconnection. So religion as a force for peace is taking the truths we know in our head. In the Abrahamic religions, we know we don't need a new theology. We know in the Abrahamic religions that the God that we all that we believe in the same God. We kept and believing in that to think about what does God want? What's his vantage point on the world? What does Abraham, our joint father, want? What is he thinking about what's happening? This could create a connection. So it's about creating connection. And maybe I'll take in 3. I was once at a conference in Amman, Jordan. I was representing the Abrahamic Reunion, and it was the regional conference of the United Religions Initiative. The URI, it's a group of about 800 or 900 grassroots organizations with close to 1 million members. And their regional conference for North Africa and the Middle East was held in Amman, Jordan. We had representatives of almost every country in the Middle East. And one of the most powerful slogans that I thought in 3 words tells it all: connection before correction. Connection before correction. The deepest problem in our conflict, as I think in most conflicts, is the deep disconnection between the people involved. Disconnection leads to hatred, it leads to fear, it leads to violence, it leads to demonizing the other side. And to overcome this disconnection, first, before you want to solve whatever the problem is, whatever your narrative is, begin connection before correction. So when you're connected, there's the potential for growth, for change. And that's why one of the greatest challenges is you have movements that sanctify disconnection, whether it is the BDS movement, whether it's anti-radicalization. Forget about whether they're right or they're wrong, but leading to more disconnection is the problem. It's not going to getting people more fearful, more angry at each other. This just poisons the atmosphere.
Yeah, and in Israel, often Jews and Muslims may live in villages right next to each other, yet there is little interaction. They don't speak the same language. One speaks Hebrew, the other Arabic. And how do you overcome that obstacle in your programs? Do you use interpreters?
So language is a challenge. I think in Israel, and many Palestinians speak Hebrew. Unfortunately, less Israelis speak Arabic. I've been learning a little bit, not enough. So it's going slowly. But I think generally things are in Hebrew or some a little English, a little Arabic, and sometimes we need translations for part of it. But the language is culture. It's not only about the technicalities. To know someone's language is to really feel their culture. So I think it's also a way to respect each other by knowing language. So even if you can't speak fluently, I like to at least know a few words so I could at least give some respect by talking in a different language.
Yes. Unfortunately, working on peace can be dangerous, and I was wondering how Imam al-Baz, who was stabbed by, we don't know, I think the story is still not you're
Right.
not
Right.
quite
There,
sure
there,
who
there
did
was
it, but how's he
what they
doing?
did, right? Okay, so Sheikh Khalil Al-Baz, he is the Imam of Tel Sheva, which is a Bedouin city not far from where I live. And while closing the mosque, he was attacked by some Muslim extremists. It's not clear exactly what it was about, but certainly he feels part of it was because he's been involved with the different interfaith connections, and somehow extremists took maybe their anger out against him. So I don't know exactly what the reason is, but certainly he's a very dear colleague. And unfortunately, it's such a holy person has to be attacked. It's really an abomination.
Yeah. So just a little bit of your background. I know that you were born in New York and studied in Israel and eventually made Aliyah, which
Yes.
is living in Israel. Was that always the plan?
From early on, I did want to live in Israel. I feel that this is one of the great stories of our times, for the not just for the Jewish people, for humanity. A story about after thousands of years of being dispersed around the world, to be able to every day to pray and hope that a vision could be achieved, and somehow having it happen, and our challenge to have it happen, to make it be a blessing for different people to overcome the conflicts. I know that the Dalai Lama used to send children from Tibetan children from Dharmasala to Israel for the summer. There were special programs for them. And he said that he wants to give hope that the children of Tibet that are living in exile after the Chinese occupation would know that you could keep your identity and maybe one day come home.
Now, you live in Hebron, where mostly 700,000 Palestinians live.
So
And
I live in the hills of Hebron.
okay.
It's not in the city itself. It's further south, but we're not that far away.
Yeah.
And right, Hebron, as you're saying, is a place that a lot of there've been a lot of violence.
Mhm.
It began with one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world, from the time of King David till 1929. This is more than 3,000 years, continuous Jewish community. But in 1929, there was a massacre of the Jews living in Hebron, and that's one of the reasons why despite everything, it was important for Jews to find a place to be connected up to Hebron. Also, Hebron is the site of the Tomb of the Patriarchs, the oldest building standing in Israel, built by King Herod more than 2,000 years ago, is the building that over the cave that, according to Jewish tradition, is the burial site of our ancestors. So Hebron, on one hand, is a sign. The parts of the conflict everybody knows, but there are parts of connection in Hebron that are less well known, even in terms of the Jewish community in Hebron. And there's an interfaith group led by the spokesperson of the Jewish community of Hebron, Noam Arnon, with Muslim leaders in Hebron. I've been in the 97% of Hebron. It's not fully mixed. 97% of Hebron is part of the Palestinian Authority, and the Jewish community is part of 3% of Hebron. But there's a lot of hatred and violence, but there's also stories of connection there. I could tell you one very lovely story about my wife there. My wife was once praying in the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron. It was a Friday afternoon, and for some reason, she was the only person in the cave, in the building. And suddenly, the muazzin, which is the Muslim call for prayer, goes off on the part of the mosque, part of the cave, which is a mosque. and it's very, very loud. She realizes she can't keep praying. But then she thinks, if you can't beat them, join them, because we're praying to the same God. So she joined in with the Moazin, and she realized then what a beautiful voice it is. When you resist it, it's noise. When you connect to it, it becomes music. And that was on a Friday, and she asked me if I think it's a real person singing or is it some sort of a recording. So that Sunday, I had a meeting with Muslim religious leaders in Hebron, and I asked them, and a friend of mine, Sheikh Ahmed of Abu Snena, says, of course it's a person. It's a relative of mine, and I'll send him regards. We're so close and connected, we could all be. But in fact, we want to go deeper and deeper to get to the violence and overcoming the violence. The book of Genesis, it's a book about brothers in conflict, but a lot of it's about overcoming the conflict. We have, and my father-in-law, who's a professor of Bible, points out, we have Isaac and Ishmael, there's tension between them, but their stories end with the scene of them coming together to, there's a scene of their last encounter that's told about. They're coming together to bury their father in Hebron, in the tomb of the patriarchs. And then Jacob and Esau, they have a lot of conflict between them. But there too, there's reconciliation. When Jacob comes back to the Holy Land, he's encountered by Esau, and they find a way to reconcile. And there too, their last encounter is they come together at the burial of their common father. And the book of Genesis ends with Joseph and his brothers. They too had conflict, but they overcame it, and they too reconnect at the tomb of their father. So the story of Genesis is that in the family, and Jews and Arabs, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, we're all one big family. There's conflict, there's tensions, but the challenge is to say, let's overcome these tensions and let this brotherly, sisterly, sibling connection become a source of connection. And a symbol of that could and should be the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron, which has been a site of tremendous violence, but we hope will become a sign of connection. In Arabic, the name of the city of Hebron is Al-Khalil, which means the friend, referring to Abraham, friend of God. In Hebrew, Hebron includes the word chaver, which means friend.
That's beautiful. I wanted to show you have many, many events. One is the iftar, if I can.
Iftars are lovely events. Yes, here, the Abrahamic reunion has one of our yearly events is having that scene you had, okay? Here I'm standing on the far right. Next to me is Elio McLean, who was interviewed in the movie that we saw before. And here we're, the iftar, Ramadan is a month of fasting. It's also a month of spiritual work. And the breaking of the fast on Ramadan is there's a meal called the iftar. And this has often been an opportunity for interfaith iftars. And this is very wide throughout Israel, because Ramadan is something which deservingly is respected by Jews and Christians. It's to showing self-control, to fast for an entire month. Certainly something worthy of respect, this ability to, especially people don't take off for the month. People continue working. Sometimes it's physical labor and sometimes it's the hot summer and people are fasting. So the woman here is Hadassah Fruman. She's the Rabbi Menachem Fruman, right? And so we have the meal together. They're very this is on the roof of Sheikh Rassan Manasra's home. He's a Sufi master. He also spoke in the video you saw. And they carefully prepare kosher meals for the Jews who joined them. And at the end, we time to pray. The Muslims, their prayer. The Jews, we pray Tfilat Arvit, and iftars are always times of great connection. There was one beautiful story that there was once a joint iftar held on a day which was also a fast day for Jews. And at the end of the day, we realized there's a problem because Muslims break the fast at sundown, where Jews break the fast at what's called the time that the stars come out, which is about 18 minutes later. But Rassan Menashe's father said, let us wait, and so that we could all eat together. So that was a very, very moving moment of connection.
Great. Across villages and towns and cities in Israel and Palestine, the Abrahamic reunion has brought Jews into mosques and Muslims into synagogues and Christians into Druze shrines and Druze into churches. For what purpose and how does this help?
Ultimately, to the extent for religion to be force for peace, it means that we have to feel that we have a shared, there's something shared about the divinity that connects us. Part of that connection is to respect each other's prayers and also respect each other's places of prayer.
In your organization, you emphasize training women, young people, students, religious leaders to develop a network of understanding and to train people in conflict resolution and interfaith dialogue. What's the purpose there?
Well, the world's going to change. We believe in a bottom-up approach. Not for having the great leader, who I wish we had, but it's not going to be enough. To change, you need the people. The problem is within the people and how they're relating to each other. So you can't leave it to a elite. You can't leave it to the people above. You need to grassroots involve as many people as possible, and we need not one peacemaker. We need millions of peacemakers. People once asked, the fact that you have good relations with somebody, some Arab, is that going to bring peace? My response is, if a Jew has a good relationship with an Arab, this already is peace. This is not a means to peace. This is it. This is real peace. We would like to expand this by 1 million. We would like to be able to involve many of the issues that there are conflicts relating to resolve them in a way which is a blessing, or at least the best we could do for all sides involved. But really, it's not only a means to an end. But I think what's most important are the groups that have consistent relations. Because I think part of the concept of the Abrahamic religion reunion, and part of the concept of some of the other groups, for example, the Interfaith encounter, it's about saying that it's not just about an event here and there or a conference. You have to also have those things. What really makes a change is developing long-term relationships between people. So a get-together of a conference is great, but what matters is keeping up the relationships. There are a lot of study groups that I'm a part of, and those are always very illuminating. There's one of West Bank rabbis and sheiks. We'll have another meeting this Sunday at the Shorashim, which you're
yes.
Hanan Schlesinger is part of that. Khalid is part of that.
Say hi for me.
I'll send your best, and we send our and it's studying together. It's doing something real together. Getting together and just saying the right things about all religions are against violence and peace, which is true and it has to be said. But at some point, you have to go beyond that. And studying together and praying together and doing things together, that creates the connections that hopefully will lead to correction.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Amen. You also you've done so many things that are so interesting. It's so hard to choose. I do want our listeners to hear a little bit about, I mean, you're so prolific, you've written so many books, but your time in India, and that you study and write about the relationship between Judaism and Eastern spirituality. Can you tell us a
Yes,
little bit about that?
and maybe I'll try to give a larger picture to it. I feel part of, there's a beautiful insight at the end of a book called India by Azriel Kalbach, that maybe not the whole story, but getting to the East-West divide is the divide of the doing-being divide. If Western civilization is about doing, it's about changing the world, it's about building the future, whereas Eastern spirituality is about being, it's about being present, it's about the way that Eckhart Tolle takes it to the power of now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that part of the power and message of Judaism, and even the location at the crossroads between East and West, is integrating the doing and the being. We could see that, maybe I'll give one short teaching about this, and afterwards maybe one more question to, then I'll see how my daughter's doing, is that the syllable in the East that represents the unity of existence is the Om. Now in Judaism, we don't say Om, we say Shalom. Shalom incorporates the Om, but there's something that's not in the Om, the Shin. Now the Zohar explains this. The word Shalom begins with the Hebrew letter Shin,
Mm-hmm.
which represents in Hebrew fire. Fire is Esh in Hebrew. The end of the word Shalom is the Hebrew letter Mem, which represents Mayim, water. Shalom is to integrate fire and water. Eastern spirituality maybe is like water. It takes all forms. It doesn't change it. It accepts the form that it is given. Western civilization is about fires. It's Prometheus stealing the fire from the gods to begin Western civilization. What Shalom is about is to say we must integrate the fire and the water, the doing and the being.
Well, for me, that also Shalom, as many of us know, is also said to mean hello, goodbye, and peace. And so I think that pretty much ties it together. For your last question, if you were speaking to the people of the world, what would the message be that you'd want them to know about your work on peace?
To keep it simple, I think really those three words that I learned at the conference in Amman, I feel somehow that gets to the essence. This is in some way, this is maybe something one of the differences maybe between Judaism and Buddhism, because I have a friend who actually met the Dalai Lama.
Oh,
And
cool.
to say in a word, what's Judaism is about. So he said it's all about connection, community, relationships. It's the Bible, and that's part of the deep spiritual work of presence in those aspects are less focused in Buddhism. But being as it may, it's all about connection, and therefore, in terms of the faith and the problems, connection before correction. In a world that we're all connected, that we could see the good in each other's, we could feel a sense of connected to each other, that we could listen to each other. This is a world that will find the correction to create the better world for all of us.
Amen. So thanks so much, Rabbi, for your time and telling us about the great projects you and others are working on for peace in the Middle East. Next Tuesday, July 6th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we'll be speaking with Eli Avidor, Although he fought as a soldier in the Israeli army in the Yom Kippur War of 1973 and was wounded and spent 3 months in the hospital, today he is against what many call the occupation, and he spends his time working with combatants for peace. I'm sure you'll find his story fascinating and a lesson in introspection and change. Thanks to our Peace with Penny listeners today, and if you'd like to listen again or to any of our previous interviews, you can find them on my website at pennyst.com under podcasts. And until next week, may you live in peace, shalom, and salam.